checks like Nike, let me give you a good night kiss.
What's up, YouTube? It's Check Like Nike back with another NBA video. Wilt Chamberlain, the man, the myth, the legend. The player that we've heard so much about, yet never got to see play. And if you were watching Wilt play back in the 1950s, someone come get your grandpa. And yes, you heard that correctly, the 1950s. Yet here we are, 6 decades later, still talking about and wondering if the legend of Wilt will ever sink away into the abyss. But if you do know of Wilt, then you surely know of his unbreakable records that he holds, both on the court and off the court, if you know what I mean. But as the game continues to evolve, you can't help but question if Wilt's 100-point game record might just be in jeopardy, especially in the nearing future. As for the 1960s, Wilt's fingerprints are all over the high-scoring stat sheets, having only himself and Elgin Baylor scratching the surface of a 70-point performance in that decade. Baylor was also a 3-time 60-point scorer. But let's put that into perspective with the Big Dipper. Wilt had 32 60-plus point showouts. That's 29 more than Elgin Baylor, his only fellow 1960 ball player that even came close to it. And although we have seen other 60-point performances at times, like in the 70s with guys like Rick Barry or George Gervin, and even David Thompson, who dropped 73 in a loss against the Pistons back in 78, but it would take nearly 20 more years since someone would see 70 points again in a single NBA game. That person? A fellow David Robinson. So if these 70-point performances are so scarce to come by, then why have we seen it twice in the 2022-2023 season? In fact, 2023 kicked off with Donovan Mitchell tying Robinson's 71-point performance on the second day of the new year, January 2nd, 2023. And what makes it even more amazing is that only 55 days later, we've seen it again at the hands of Damian Lillard. Since the start of the 2000s, we've seen a handful of 60-point games. We had Shaq in 2000, Kobe a few times in 05, 07, 09, and once again in his last game ever, his retirement game in 2016. Iverson did it in 05, McGrady did it in 04, and not to mention the very famous 81-point night that Kobe had back in 2006 that stands right behind Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. And although it is an astonishing record, Wilt's 100-point game was kind of a lifetime ago, and people don't even compare it to modern-day ball anymore. But as for Kobe, who kind of did it in modern day, 81 points is starting to seem like a breakable record. Now that being said, since the start of the 2010s, we've seen 60-point performances 22 times, and from multiple guys, unlike any other era of ball. We've seen it from Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic, Stephen Curry and his splash bro Klay Thompson, Bradley Beal, Kemba Walker, Kyrie Irving, Karl-Anthony Towns, centers, guards, forwards. So is the league getting softer, or are the players getting harder? One can argue about the toughness of the game between the 80s and 90s versus now. But as for the 50s and 60s, it's safe to say that even a 60 or 70-point game in 2023 is more difficult to achieve than a 100-point game per se in 1962. The game's been through multiple changes since then, on offense, defense, and even the physical rules and play style. In fact, the world-renowned GOAT, not renowned by me, please don't come for me, has only ever seen 69 points in a single game. So how'd Devin Booker do it in 2017? How'd Spida do it in January? And how'd Dame do it just last week? The 2022-23 season is on pace to have a historic value in terms of 40-point plus games. In fact, 40-point games are becoming the norm. We're seeing them from our biggest stars in the league to our not-so-big stars. On any given night this season, you're likely to have found a 40-point night, maybe even a 50. This year, we've had 136 40-point games by 44 different players. The third highest number of 40-point games in a season ever, shadowing only the 61-62 season, thanks Wilt, and the recent 18-19 season. Thank you, James Harden. As for this year, there's not really one guy to thank, as many players are getting their hands on those stat sheets. Well, I guess we can thank the new era of three-pointers that has evolved immensely. It sure helped Damian Lillard out last week as he tied for the second most three-pointers made in a single game. He now stands just below Klay Thompson, who dropped 14 threes back in 2018, and alongside Stephen Curry and the GOAT Zach LaVine, all of whom have racked up 13 threes in a single game. But get this, could Spida have actually beaten Wilt that night in January? Or could he have at least come eye to eye with Kobe's 81-point night? Here's why I think so. At the end of the first quarter, Spida only had 5 points. That means that the other 66 came after the fact. 53 of his points were scored in only 3 quarters of regulation, and the other 13 in the short 5 minutes of overtime. This was much like Kobe's 81-point night, where Kobe scored 55 in just the second half. And ironically enough, Donovan actually tied Bryant's record for most points after halftime, as he too scored 55. Take a look at the comparison in the two games. So what if he also scored 15 or 20 in that first quarter? And what if the Bulls were able to keep their fight up in post-regulation and we saw a second overtime? As an NBA fan myself, I'm nearly certain that I'll see an 80 or 90 point game in the near future. Maybe even by Booker or Dame or Donovan Mitchell. Or maybe by a new face like Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum, or Zach LaVine. However, you can't help but wonder which record of Wilt is next to go. His 100-point night, or maybe even his 50 points per game season average. I mean, hey, Dame's got his eye on that prize as well, having averaged 40 points in his 10 games leading up to that 71-point night. Now I can go on and on about the toughness of today's league, and I could sit here and list you crazy nights that we've seen from these guys in the past 3 seasons even, and guarantee any given player or any given night, you're bound to see an astonishing performance somewhere. That being said, I want to hear from you guys what your thoughts are, or who you think will possibly break Kobe's 81-point record, or Wilt's 100-point game, or the 50-point season average, or whatever other records that these legends all hold. Well, I can tell you one record that definitely won't get broken in today's soft-ass NBA. Wilt's gone his entire career without ever fouling out of a game. Yep, you heard that right. Most consecutive games in a row without fouling out is in fact a stat, and Wilt has the record. But records are meant to be broken, and I think we may be in the generation of doing just that. I mean, as we all know, LeBron recently took the crown on most points scored ever by an NBA player. So, without further ado, leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe for more NBA content by yours truly. Until next time, thank you guys for watching. Niky out.
Nigga, get your ass checked like a fucking Nike.